Hi, I'm Fiona Macrae, and I thought it would be handy if I just started with a little bit of my background. So I was diagnosed with primary breast cancer in 2005, and as a result of not being able to get travel insurance, I did work in the travel insurance industry, but I couldn't get any travel insurance for myself after my primary diagnosis because I hadn't had the cancer removed when I was trying to get cover. I just thought it could be improved, and that led on to me creating the travel insurance brand InsuranceWith. Subsequently, in 2020, I was diagnosed with secondary breast cancer, so I now live with secondary cancer. And but that's also one of the reasons why I'm so interested again to making sure that people with cancer and complex medical conditions can get travel insurance cover and have the right advice when traveling after a cancer diagnosis. I thought I'd just start off by giving you some points to be aware of when you're looking for travel insurance after you've had a cancer diagnosis. So, one of the first things that I'd always recommend to people is don't exclude your cancer from any travel insurance policy that you buy. The reason for this is that you're not just excluding the cancer, because I know a lot of people will say, I'm suddenly not going to get ill from my cancer when I'm abroad, or I'm suddenly not, nothing's going to get any worse with my particular cancer while I'm away. So I think I can take that risk. However, you're not just excluding your cancer, you're excluding anything that can be attributed to your cancer or the treatment of it. So if you all you need to do really is have a look at side effects of any cancer medication that we take, and you'll see that there's an awful lot of things that you're excluding. For example, you might be taking a drug that makes you more prone to getting a DVT. So that would be excluded from your policy. Again, if the drugs that you're on makes your immune system low, you pick up an infection, you might not be covered for that as well. So always be aware of when you are, if you do decide to exclude, what you're actually excluding from cover. Um, the other thing that I would always stress people to do when looking for travel insurance is my first port of call would always be my bank, building society, check to see if I've got cover with any bank policies first. And if you have, give them a call and see if they'll also offer cover for your cancer. Some will, some won't, but it's worth a call and it can be quite cost effective to do it that way if they're willing to cover you. So that would always be my advice for first port of call. The other thing is talking about the EHIC and the GHIC card, which is the European health cards. Um, I want to stress that they're not a replacement for travel insurance. They will cover you while you're in any European country that the new GHIC covers. So there are a couple of limitations since Brexit, but not many. It's the majority of the European countries, but check the website to make sure the country that you're going to would be covered under the new GHIC card. But the reason that I say it's not a replacement for travel insurance is because um, you're only covered for what a resident of that country would get free of charge. And not all countries in Europe are completely free at point of need for health insurance, for any health treatment. So always make sure that you check what you would exactly be covered for in the country that you're traveling to. So, for example, in Greece, generally nursing care isn't covered as standard. They would expect for example, the families to come in and feed you and clean you and wash you in Greek hospitals. So that you wouldn't necessarily get nursing care covered under your GHIT card. So it's always worth checking those things out if you are going to be dependent on that as your travel insurance. The other thing that won't be covered under that is if you need to get repatriated back home. And it's not always as simple as I'm just going to get on the next budget airline flight, because you might not be able to get on that flight. If you've got something, say a visible broken leg or something like that, the airline might ask you for a fit to fly letter. They might insist that you fly with a nurse or a doctor, things like that. All of that bit would be covered under travel insurance, which a GHIC or an EHIC card won't cover you. So always be aware, if that's what you're depending on when you're traveling to Europe, what are the limitations? Um, and then the other point that I would like to make is that if you're traveling in a group, say a family or a friend group, and the travel depends on you going on that holiday, I would always recommend that everybody in that traveling party is on the same policy. So, for example, if um, you book a family holiday and say your husband and the children are on a different policy, maybe a bank policy that you haven't declared your medical condition on, and you've taken out a specialist policy that you've declared your medical condition on, should you need to cancel that holiday due to your medical condition, your policy would cover that cancellation, but it's unlikely that the policy that your husband and children, for example, are on would cover that. So I would always stress, if the travel depends on you going, that everybody in that travel party is on the same policy. So the next thing I was going to talk to you about was actually looking for travel insurance cover after you get your cancer diagnosis. Now, it can seem really difficult when you first start looking, because all the providers you used to use are now won't cover you because they're only looking for standard risks. They won't cover sort of increased medical risk or more complex medical conditions. But I am here to tell you that cover is available, but you just need to know where to look. And that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So rather than using all the comparison sites out there, my advice is just pick one comparison site. They all use the same medical screening system. So the likelihood is that you're not going to get vastly different prices from the different comparison sites. They're all going to be there or thereabouts in their pricing, because they all use the same medical screening system. So my advice is just pick one and get a price from there. So there are also a number of specialist providers, and there's a travel insurance directory called on the Money Helper website, and Ovacome will be putting up a link to this website that you can go on, and it's got all the specialist travel insurance providers on it. But again, there's an awful lot of them. So my advice there is pick a couple of them, but look to see what medical screening systems they're using, and choose a couple of providers that are using different medical screening systems, because it's the medical screening system that actually makes the difference in the price when you're talking about the more complex medical conditions. So if you're using the same medical screening system all the time, the outcome's going to be more or less the same. So that's why pick ones with different medical screening systems. And on the Money Helper travel insurance directory, they helpfully just print up what medical screening system each provider uses. So it's easy to pick and choose which providers you want to get a quote from. And then, so that's my advice really. And once you've checked Money Helper and you've got a quote from one of the comparison sites, that can give you sort of a view of the whole market really, and roughly the prices that you're going to pay. And the other thing that I'm always asked is, how can I reduce the costs of my travel insurance once I've had a cancer diagnosis? So there's a couple of things that you can do and think about to help reduce the cost. The key to this is always flexibility. So flexibility around your dates and where you want to travel to, and the length that you're going to travel for rather. So think about treatment when you're having treatment, when you're having surgery. The further away you are from any surgery, obviously the price will drop. If you want to go, say, 12 weeks after surgery, that's going to be more expensive than if you wait sort of 6 months after surgery. And again, if you've just started a medication, again, you're going to probably struggle to get cover until that medication settled down, and that can take 6 to 12 weeks. So be flexible around the dates if you're starting new medication or if you're just starting your treatment as well. If you're on chemotherapy, normally travel insurers like to ensure that you've had at least one or two chemotherapies, so to make sure that any side effects you do get are managed before you go off on holiday. So again, be flexible around those dates, and also think about destinations. So, you know, Europe will be cheaper than if you want to go to, say, Australia and New Zealand, and Australia and New Zealand are cheaper than Asia and, sort of Far East and the Middle East. They're cheaper than if you wanted to go to sort of America, Canada, and the Caribbean, and that's cheaper than Mexico is the most expensive place to get travel insurance for at the moment. So think about the areas that you're traveling to, and that can make a difference to the price as well. And also, I would advise you to initially look for a single trip quote. I know you've probably always had a multi-trip quote pre-diagnosis, but but lots of people start off looking for an annual multi-trip quote and get really disheartened when they can't get cover. So my advice is always look for a single trip quote first, and if you're offered a single trip, then inquire if you can also have a multi-trip as well. There are companies out there that will offer you multi-trip cover when you're on treatment, but you've got to be quite stable on that treatment. So it's got to be on, side effects managed and things like that. So you will be able to get it, but maybe not straight away. So you might only be able to get single trip quotes straight away. So that's sort of all my general advice. And I'm now really happy to take some questions from everybody. Normally have quite a lot of questions based on the advice that I've given. So yeah, so I'm happy to take the questions, Catherine, if you're ready for those.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That was really interesting. Just to remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, you can pop it into the Q&A box, and we'll be able to read them out to Fiona. We've already had some questions, and so I'll start off with those, if that's okay with everybody. So, and just to add as well, we have popped that link that Fiona referred to earlier in her talk in the chat box. So can you advise on borderline ovarian tumours? Insurance cover, can you advise as borderline ovarian tumours insurance cover, as it's treated as a cancer diagnosis, but it's not cancer, only abnormal cells? I had this 3 years ago, but I have to declare this and find my policy costs are high due to the situation, or won't cover as this is treated as cancer due to 3 monthly checkups for 10 years.
Okay, so you would still need to declare it because although I don't know, did you say it's not cancer, Catherine, or is it just because it's borderline? Is it classed as cancer or not?
No.
No. So you would probably have to declare it because you're having routine checkups with the doctor. But make sure when you're declaring your checkups that you say that they're routine. You're not waiting for any results. It's just a routine scan or something like that. So there is a big difference between waiting for scan results for a diagnosis and waiting for routine scan results. So, for example, I have routine scans every 3 months to make sure that my cancer's behaving itself. But when I get travel insurance, I just say that's a routine scan. Although it could show something up, it's still classed as a routine scan. I already have a diagnosis. So I think that's an important point to note. And then, I mean, if it's not cancer, you don't have to declare it as cancer. You probably just have to declare that you're on routine scans. That would be my advice. If you're unsure, it might be worth talking to a couple of providers, having a little look on the website link that we've given out, and chat to a couple of those providers. I mean, specialist providers are going to be more expensive than non-specialist providers, but it might be that the non-specialist providers might not offer you cover because they don't fully understand it. The specialist providers will, but there is going to be an increase in premium, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Just having a look in the chat box now. Do you recommend getting travel insurance if traveling in the UK?
Yeah, it's always helpful to have travel insurance while you're in the UK. I mean, I know we don't need the medical cover because we've got the NHS. However, if you, I don't know, maybe live in the north of England and you're down in Cornwall and something happens and you need to go into hospital, the travel insurance would pay for you to be transferred back to your normal hospital. Say if you couldn't travel home as planned, travel insurance would help you get back to your your regular hospital where you get your treatment. And also if you spent quite a lot of money on the holiday, some of these holiday cottages that you can book can be thousands of pounds, and if you've booked that and then you can't go, you would have that cancellation cover as well. So it is always worthwhile, just even just for the cancellation cover, it's worthwhile.
Thank you very much, Fiona. The next question is, I'm in the fortunate position that I'm currently NED, no evidence of disease, and I am fit and well. But due to some uncertainties on my original diagnosis, I am unable to answer the normal screening questions and have so far been unable to get insurance. How can people in a similar position get to talk to a human who can assess the real level of risk rather than someone using an algorithm?
Again, I think it depends on the providers that you go to. And my advice stands about looking for providers that use different medical screening systems. And again, the Money Helper website will guide you in that direction. It tells you, which screening system they use. If they've got the one-to-one medical screening, if they offer that as well, that will be detailed on that website. So maybe pop on there and have a look at some of the providers on there. Maybe try some of the ones that you haven't tried. From what you've said, if you're no evidence of active disease, the further away you are from that original diagnosis and nothing's changing, presumably you're on regular scans and nothing's changing, then from what you're saying, I can't see any reason why you're not getting cover. It's just about trying to help people understand more about your medical condition. It might be easier if you spoke to them. And as I say, the Money Helper would be able to point you in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Is there separate insurance for going on a cruise?
You need to ensure that you've got cruise cover on your policy. Some travel insurance providers will have a cruise extension that you would add on to your travel insurance policy. And some travel insurance providers do specific cruise travel insurance policies. So just have a look depending on who you're going to be using. And but the majority of people, the majority of travel insurance providers offer cruise cover, and I would encourage you, if you're going on a cruise, to get that because it is worth the extra cover. And a lot of cruise liners won't let you get on board unless you've got the right travel insurance policy as well.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Can you say something about policies which cover adventure travel? For example, trekking, camping, more remote areas?
Yeah, I mean that cover is available. So, for example, trekking, there's policies available. A lot of people do different treks and say challenges, raising money for charities, cancer charities. Lots of people do that. I would stress that when you're doing a trek and things like that, you will have to buy extra cover, so activity cover on the majority of policies. Just be aware of the maximum height they'll let you trek to. So you might have to buy extra cover. So, for example, if you wanted to go to Kilimanjaro, forget how high that is above sea level. I'm not even going to guess. Sorry, but that would probably be the highest activity pack because it is a high mountain. So you'd probably have to take the highest activity pack to get that cover for that height. Remote areas, provided you pick the right area of travel, then you've got cover. I think the only thing I would stress is that if you are traveling to this remote area and something should happen, how quickly could emergency cover get to you? So it's not easy. That the closest hospital might not be a hospital that can treat what's wrong with you. And it's about being able to get you to the right hospital. And it's not easy, and it's not as simple as dropping an aeroplane in, or a helicopter or something in to pick you up. It's not always as simple as that. You might not be fit to fly in an aeroplane. You might not be fit to fly at all. So how are they going to get that treatment to you? So again, that's a consideration depending on how complex your condition is. And a lot of people still can travel when they're not as well as they would like to be, but just to consider your own limitations as well. If you're considering remote areas, that would just be my word of caution, really.
Thank you very much, Fiona. The next question is, and I'll read the whole message. Thank you for this information. It has been so helpful, and also thank you so much for setting up your travel insurance company. I found it really daunting last year, but this year I went on my first holiday to Dubai since my diagnosis. We do love Mexico as a destination. Are there any particular reasons why Mexico is more expensive?
It's just treatment costs, really. It's just the cost of medical treatment there. It is expensive. It is more expensive than US and Canada, really. So yeah, so that's why it's more. I mean, I say it's more expensive. It's not drastically more expensive than America, but it is more expensive than America. It's still. I mean, lots of people still travel there and get cover and everything like that. It's not drastically more expensive, but it is more expensive and it is medical costs.
Thank you very much. Are there companies that insure those with metastases? It seems to make a difference.
Yeah, there's lots of companies that will cover people with Mets. I have Mets myself, and yeah, I can get cover. And there's a number of companies that will offer you cover. Again, the travel insurance directory, a lot of people on there will cover people. In fact, the majority probably should cover people with Mets on there. As I say, just have a look on there and just pick a couple that use different medical screening systems, and you should be able to get a selection of cover.
Thank you very much. Next question is, originally diagnosed in 2015, had a recurrence in 2020. Do I give details of cancer in 2015 as well as recurrence?
You'll be asked when your original diagnosis was, and then they will also ask you when your most recent diagnosis was as well, because that's still relevant to your overall health picture. So yeah, you need to mention both.
Thank you very much. Does it make a difference to the cost of insurance if I take it out nearer to the time I travel? Is it better to get a quote now or wait until I'm due to travel? I'm planning to go to Portugal in May and I have just finished radiotherapy 1 week ago.
Okay. So you might have to wait a couple of weeks until you finish, I think it's about normally 4, 5, 6 weeks after radiotherapy, and then start to look for a quote. I would encourage you to get a quote and cover as soon as you can, because that would give you the cancellation cover should anything happen and you need to cancel the policy. If you wait until the last minute, you can buy last minute policies that don't have the cancellation cover in them, and they work out to be slightly cheaper. Um, but depending on how much the holiday costs, whether cancellation's important if you're spending a lot on the holiday, or for example, if you're going to stay with friends and family and you bought a budget flight, it's maybe not cost you that much. So the cancellation cover might not be important to you. So that's something to consider. And as I say, you can get policies that don't have cancellation cover, and they're slightly cheaper. So you could look for that depending on the holiday cost, really.
Thank you very much, Fiona. We've talked about holidays. Does it matter? Does it make any difference if I'm not traveling to go on holiday, but to visit and stay with my family in my country of origin? I'm a UK resident with dual nationality, originally from an EU country. Thank you.
What was the start of that question? Sorry, Catherine.
Sorry, I apologise. I'll read it again. We have talked about holidays. Does it make any difference if I am not travelling to go on holiday, but to visit and stay with my family in my country of origin? I'm a UK resident with dual nationality, originally from a EU country. Thank you.
Okay, I'm wondering if that is whether they actually need the travel insurance. If they've got dual nationality, they'll have medical care in that country. And presumably, if something happens and they've got to stay longer, they've got family to stay with. Um, I think it really depends on whether if something happened abroad and you would want to come back to the UK to your own treating team and you would want to be repatriated back to the UK, or whether you would be happy to stay in your own country, in your home country. Um, I think that all depends on that. It doesn't make your travel insurance any cheaper if that was the question. But it wouldn't make a difference to you're traveling abroad. It wouldn't make any difference to your travel insurance policy. You would just declare your medical condition in the usual way. I don't know if that answered the question or not. I mean, I'm happy to clarify further if you want to say, were you asking whether you needed the travel insurance or if you needed a different type of travel insurance? I'm not quite sure on that question.
We'll see if we get any further information. We might come back to that if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I have tried to get insurance, but unable to get even a quote as the cost of the holiday was over £5,000. Why is this?
So some travel insurance policies will have a limit to your cancellation cover. Some are 3,000, some are 5,000, some are 7.5, some are 10. So I think it's just about finding a provider that will cover the amount that you're going to the cost of your holiday. Some providers also, although they might not offer cover up as much as you need, you can buy a special top-up policy that will cover the rest of, so say for example, your holiday is £10,000 per person. So sorry, let me just clarify. So on the policy, it's per person. So if your holiday, the maximum is £5,000, that's £5,000 per person. So if you're saying you're going on a holiday that, say, for example, could be £10,000 per person, you can take out the travel insurance policy and then buy a top-up policy for the other £5,000. There are providers that let you do that as well to make sure that the whole value of your holiday is covered for cancellation.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Lots of questions still coming through, if that's okay, Fiona, to continue.
Yeah.
Is there somewhere that offers a translation provision to support you if you do need to use the policy so that you can advise the medics of your full medical situation?
I'm not sure if that is available, but normally if you phone the 24-hour emergency helpline on your policy, you can talk to them and then they will normally have somebody on the ground in the country or somebody in their office that can explain what you need. So my first port of call would be the emergency help number on your policy, and they'd be able to best guide you what to do.
Thank you, Fiona. Next question is, can you give any advice about how to give information to the medical screening teams? Is it best to call them directly or do it online?
I would always suggest do it online first, run through everything online. If you've got a question after that, or you just want to check something, then call them up and give them the reference number that you've got, because you'll be able to save the quote or they'll have saved the quote for you. If you don't get a reference number, normally if you just give them your surname and your date of birth, they can trace the quote for you. And then you can ask any questions. You can ask them to check through your quote for you to make sure you've completed everything correctly. But if you do it online first, it's going to cut short the length of that call because they're not going through everything with you. You filled the majority of it in, and they're just checking it all through for you, and maybe asking your questions as well. So always start off online, and then you can always phone in if you've got questions or you want them to check through the quote that you've done it correctly.
Thank you, Fiona. Is it cheaper the longer you're in remission? Do you offer insurance for terminal ovarian cancer? Thank you.
I think it's a different. I mean, terminal's a very contentious word, really. In with insurance, there's no or in general, really, there's no real definition of terminal. So, for example, I've got secondary breast cancer. Is my condition terminal? I still think I'm treatable. I'm never going to be cured, but it's it's quite a grey area. So it's so while you still have treatment options, travel insurance cover is available to you. There's more and more people living with cancer rather than dying of cancer as medicines improve. So I think it becomes more of an issue, and I think using the word terminal, personally, I don't think is helpful, either by insurers or I don't think it's helpful at all. But yeah, I mean, I think while you're still being able to take treatment and offered treatment, you should be able to get cover, and you might be not curative, but you might be in remission as well, and you're still on your 3 monthly scans, making sure that nothing comes back. And the longer that you're in that period of stability, the cheaper your travel insurance will be.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I am looking for annual trip cover for up to 70 days at a time. What would your advice be, given the fact that I'm due to start that targeted therapy, i.e. maintenance therapy? The cancer is now under control.
Okay, I think you might struggle to get 70-day trip cover. I'm not sure of anybody that would cover trips for that long with somebody. You definitely wouldn't get that, I don't think, on an annual policy. You might need to take a long stay policy, but there will be limitations to age on that policy, on those type of policies. Normally, if you have an annual policy, a multi-trip policy, it's normally limited to either 30 or 45 days trip duration. You could maybe take a single trip policy out for longer than that. Again, you just need to look at different providers as well. Sometimes you can get single trips up to 90 days, just depending on the provider you use. But I don't think you'll be able to get an annual policy that's going to cover you for 70 days.
Thank you. What percentage increase would you expect to pay when travelling to Canada over Europe?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. And it would just depend on medical conditions declared, etc., etc. It's not a straight answer, unfortunately.
Thank you. Debulking surgery could remove things like the spleen. Does this need to be declared separately to the main cancer diagnosis?
It depends on the questions that you're answered. You might be asked the question, have you had debulking surgery? And then that would be, they would already have taken that into consideration, but some providers might ask you to declare that separately. So just depending on the questions you're asked when you're declaring that condition.
Thank you very much. I needed a colostomy at the time of my surgery for ovarian cancer. This was reversed last March. Do I still need to declare this?
You'd need to declare the surgery, but then you would be asked the question whether you've had a reversal or not. And you just need to say yes, and then that's all taken into account. So you should be able to declare that all through the medical screening questions.
Thank you. I'm also fortunate to be no evidence of disease. How long do I need to declare an ovarian cancer diagnosis?
So it really depends on the questions that are asked. So some providers will ask, have you ever had cancer? So then you would always be declaring it. Some might say in the last 5 years, some might say in the last 10 years. If you're still having routine scans, then you would still have to carry on declaring it while you're having those routine scans, or if you're on any treatment at all for it, any maybe preventative treatment, immunotherapy, you would still have to declare it. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. I was refused travel insurance to Spain for 5 days. I'm currently on watch and wait. What might be the basis for refusal, please?
I think it's because there's not a clear diagnosis. So normally travel insurance providers won't give cover unless there's a clear diagnosis or a treatment plan. So depending on what they're watching and waiting on, they probably won't consider cover until that's sort of cleared up or a treatment plan's been decided and started. That's what it sounds like to me.
Thank you. My cancer returned after 3 years, and I have just finished my chemotherapy 6 weeks ago, and I'm now in remission. I've started targeted therapy treatment 2 weeks ago. What would you advise? Sorry, what would you advise? What would you advise in getting travel insurance cover?
Okay, so if you started targeted treatment just about 2 weeks ago, I'd give it another 2 weeks to make sure that you're settled in on your medication. Any side effects are managed as well. And then I would start looking for a single trip policy. Start with the Money Helper website and just follow the advice that I've given. And hopefully you should get some quotes from there. As you move forward and the longer you're on the immunotherapy and it's working well, hopefully you'll be able to get an annual policy in the next, 6 months. But initially you'll probably only be able to get a single trip policy.
Thank you. Do you need a fit to fly letter from your oncologist?
You don't need a fit to fly letter from your oncologist for your travel insurance to be covered. They need to agree with your travel insurance, your travel plans, basically. So, provided you've discussed it with them and they're happy for you to travel and they will have marked your notes, that's fine. You don't need the actual physical letter. However, what I would suggest is that if you're asking for any assistance at the airport with the airline or the airport or anything like that, always worth having a fit to fly letter because I've heard of people, getting to the gate and because they've asked for assistance, they've asked them if for a fit to fly letter and they haven't been able to produce one and they've been refused boarding on the plane. And again, that type of thing's not covered under travel insurance. So I would always stress if you're asking for any sort of help, at the airport or with the airline, get a fit to fly letter. I normally get one as a matter of course, just in case. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I've got METs in my hips, and sometimes I can't stand for very long. So it might be at the last minute I might ask for some help. So I always find that it's handy just to have the fit to fly letter. But it's not required for your travel insurance. It just needs to be noted on your records.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm currently insured with yourselves the 2nd year running. Why is Mexico the only country excluded on my policy?
That'll be what you've asked for. You can have USA and America worldwide, including USA, America, and the Caribbean, excluding Mexico, or you can have worldwide, including Mexico. It would have been the cover that that you would have asked for at the time, I presume. But you can update it if you're going to Mexico.
Thank you. The next comment is, I'd be interested to know how you made InsuranceWith different from other providers.
Medical screening. We use our own in-house medical screening system, and we ask more questions. We look to understand the risk of travel rather than the lifetime risk of cancer. So I started off on the point of view that I accepted that for a lifetime risk of cancer, say for life insurance, I wasn't a fantastic risk. However, I just wanted to go for a week in Spain. And so I didn't feel that that was such a high risk because I was going next month and I knew, what my scans said and I knew the treatment I was on. So again, it's about making sure that all of that is taken into account. And we do that by asking more questions and just using our own medical screening system. And that's what makes the difference.
Thank you. Should my husband travel on my travel insurance too, although he is fit and well?
So back to the point that I was making about everybody in the travelling party being on the same travel insurance policy. If you and your husband are booked a holiday together and something should happen to you and he wouldn't travel without you, then yes, he should be, because if you need to cancel because of your medical condition, he won't have declared that on his travel insurance policy, or I doubt he would have. So he wouldn't be covered for cancellation under his own travel insurance policy. So if you needed that cancellation cover, I would suggest you were both on your policy.
Thank you. Is it more difficult to get insurance with more recurrences? I have an aneurysm, symptom-free and untreated, as well as cancer, but between recurrences, I'm fit and well, but have given up trying to get insurance. Any tips?
So you can have reoccurrences, and as you say, in that period, you've got that period of stability in between. Even sometimes if you have a reoccurrence, you might have no symptoms, but it's just a matter of changing medications again. So hopefully you should be able to get some cover in those periods of stability. Again, I would encourage you to look at the Money Helper website, and have a look at a couple of the providers on there, and see if you can get cover. It might be that you maybe need to look at cover closer to travel. I would always try and look for cover at least 2 or 3 weeks before travel, just in case you need to go through to like a one-to-one screening. There can be sometimes a delay going through to that because it's a far longer process. So, it's normally a booking system who, when you're going through to the one-to-one medical screening system as well. So I would start looking about 2 to 3 weeks before you were due to travel.
Thank you very much. If you are still having chemotherapy when you were due to go on holiday, can you still obtain cover?
It depends on the chemotherapy, how well you're managing with the chemotherapy. So if you would have to have at least one cycle under your belt so you could see how the chemotherapy, how you coped with it all and the side effects. So say you're on your second or third cycle, you should be considered for cover depending on how you're coping with it. So if your bloods are always coming back okay, any side effects are managed well by other medication, and that's all settled down, you should be able to find somebody that's going to consider cover for you. But you would need at least one cycle under your belt before cover would be considered.
Thank you. I have avoided asking my consultant certain questions about my long-term prognosis for the sake of my mental health. I currently have no signs of active cancer, but I'm not sure how to answer the online questions when obtaining a quote, e.g., have you reached a point where you cannot be cured, or is your condition terminal? Is there any advice about how to deal with this?
So, I mean, unfortunately, some providers still do ask that terminal question. Um, and in all honesty, you've not asked that question. So you've not been told that you've got terminal cancer. So you could happily answer no to that. Depending on, where you are in your treatment and what you have been diagnosed with. So, for example, I know my condition is not curable, but it's treatable. So I tick the box, not curable but treatable. And only you will know that. But bearing in your consultant will have told you whether they're aiming to cure you. I would imagine. I don't know with ovarian cancer what's discussed, but I know normally with breast cancer they will tell you if they're aiming to cure you or just they're only able to treat you, which we know when we've got secondary cancers that they can't cure it, but they can treat it.
Thank you. I have already arranged travel insurance with 2 years NED, but a recent scan revealed a tiny lung nodule, which has just been monitored with my 6 monthly scans for ovarian cancer. Do I need to inform my provider of this new information? No additional investigations or treatments are planned.
Yeah, you would need to update your provider. And again, it's going to be monitored in your regular scans. So there's no treatment. It's tiny. You would the likelihood sometimes these things go in their own, sometimes they never get any bigger. So I think you just need to tell your provider and they'll note that. They might charge you an additional premium, they might not, but it should be noted on your policy.
Thank you. So the next question is, this is so helpful, thank you. Is it possible to get a policy that only covers medical to help bring your costs down? I don't mind taking my chances on losing my luggage, airline disruption, etc.
No, it's not. And to be honest with you, the biggest risk for somebody with, health conditions like ours is going to be the medical. So that's going to make up the majority of the policy anyway. But there's nobody that I'm aware of that will just cover the medical aspect of it.
Thank you. Please, can you explain what you mean by different medical screening systems? I've looked at a number of companies, but all the screening seems to be the same. How do I find the different ones? What am I looking for?
So if you go onto the Money Helper travel insurance directory, they have lists of travel insurance providers, and they'll tell you what medical screening. They'll say medical screening system used or something, but I can't remember the words offhand. And there's one called Veris. InsuranceWith uses our in-house one called Protective, or somebody might just say in-house system, or I forget the different words, but there's two or three, and they'll be listed on the Money Helper where it's only Money Helper that you'll be able to see what screening systems are used on the providers. You won't necessarily be able to tell that, say, from if you go directly onto their website, Money Helper will give you that information.
Thank you. If I have to cancel my trip, would my husband's trip be covered too?
If he's on your policy, then yes, and because then your medical condition will have been taken into account with him as well. He's got to be named on your policy.
Thank you. I have no evidence of disease, but I'm taking maintenance PARP inhibitors since October. Our son is in Australia and we would like to visit. Obviously, because it's a long haul, we have to book months ahead. What advice would you give?
Well, I mean, you should be able to get cover and you should be able to, book in advance as well. Depending again on how long you're going to go for. There might be limitations to the amount of time that you can go for, and again, depending on your age. But you should easily be able to get, 30 days cover for the likes of Australia. And sorry, or New Zealand. I didn't.
It's Australia, yeah.
Australia, yeah, sorry. But yeah, I mean, you just need to declare your conditions, and you should be able to have that in advance, because you're NED and you're just on maintenance drugs. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be considered for cover, a couple of months in advance.
Thank you very much. Are you better to get a phone's quote as opposed to a written quote in case your application has been refused by a particular insurance company?
Again, I said start off online and then you can always phone up. I mean, just because one provider's turned you down, you don't have to say, oh, actually, so and so's turned me down for cover. That's not relevant. The way I guess sometimes that can be relevant in motor and household insurance if somebody's declined to cover you. But it's not relevant in travel insurance if you've been declined cover because of your medical condition. I guess that's the question. If that wasn't the question, can you just maybe put another one in?
Thank you very much. Is having lymphedema secondary to surgery likely to add to the premium cost?
You will have to declare it, and it may increase the cost of the policy. But yeah, you will have to declare it as well.
Thank you. Can my husband be added to my policy? I have already set up single cover policy for November. Thank you.
Yeah, you would probably have to call the provider and just ask to add your husband on, and then just pay the additional premium.
Thank you very much. So I think we're coming to the end of the webinar here today. It's gone so quickly.
Yes, hasn't it?
And there are still a few questions that we didn't quite get to, unfortunately. But Fiona has very kindly offered to look at these questions afterwards, and we can circulate the answers to those after the webinar today. But I'd like to thank all of you who attended for being here this afternoon and for all of your questions. That was really helpful, and I think that everybody benefited from hearing those and from hearing Fiona's answers to those. In the meantime, if there's anything at all that's come up that you want to chat with someone from the support team about, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us using the details we shared earlier. Thank you very much for your time today.